Okay, we're live. We are live. Hello, family. So, here's an awkward moment where I put something in chat so you can see it. Don't know why my face keeps getting blurry and then not blurry. Don't know. That's super strange. Well, hopefully you can hear me. Hi, how are you? Can you hear me? It's nice to see you made it. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me? All right, so hopefully you can hear me. I'm so glad to see. Got it. Okay. Perfect, perfect. So it looks like you're the first one here. It's so nice to see you. I still think we should, meet up so we could probably do a lot of collaborations together. I think that we have some of the same hmm, I'll just use the word vibe since but we do a lot of the same things. So and I don't know what's going on with this camera, but it was working before. It's being funny, so a little bit blurry, but that's okay. That is okay. Sometimes we just got to work with what we got. So, and I'm so glad you made it. So I'm just going to, first of all, if whether you're here, so I want to say hi, welcome to, I'm so happy to see that you made it, or you're streaming this later. So today we're actually going to talk about a really interesting topic. And if at any time you have questions or anything, you can just put them in chat. And as I see them come up, I'll answer the questions. So you can stop me at any time. But before I even start to talk about this topic, I really want to make sure that you understand that I am in no way targeting women because this topic often talks about women a lot because the research sort of demonstrates that women tend to kind of use this behavior more than men. So this is, just so you know, this is far from the case. It might seem like that at times when I'm discussing the research, but it just is the research. And we know that, men do it as well. And I will discuss some differences between men and women. And because of that, I want you to also understand I will, not necessarily be breaking down the differences in terms of gender or biological sex or any of that. That's a whole different video on its own. So, I also encourage you to do your own research. This is just my disclaimer. So, let's just get started into the topic. And I just really wanted to talk about this particular difficult topic instead of putting the video out because it often brings about a lot of questions with it. So I want to acknowledge that it can be difficult for a lot of us to just speak about because sometimes women, specifically women, not that men don't do it, but specifically women like to tear each other down, especially in public places. And I will also share some really recent updated research on that topic that is very interesting. So you're going to want to stick around for that. Now, I think this topic is probably more important now than ever before because there are so many of us spending a lot of time online, and that's across various ages, whether men, women, even kids are online a lot. So I recently came across another creator. It was another channel. It was a video that came across my feed, and she was speaking. She was absolutely devastated about all of these hateful comments that people were leaving about her guests, comments that weren't coming from men, they were coming from women. And I will link the creator's channel in the description. I believe her name is Nicole Johnson, if I pronounce that right. If I haven't, I apologize. But now to be clear, I think her channel is about something else other than the topic I'm going to talk about. I think it's about, she brings on women from varying different ages. And I think she talks about makeup and things like that and women issues. I could be totally wrong, but it just came up on my feed. Now, that video showed up at a really interesting time. And due to how upset this creator was, I was moved by her video, and it reminded me of this topic, very interesting topic that would always provide a lot of discussion among my students, particularly my female students. Now, I've noticed this very same dynamic when teaching psychology, and it always seems to really surprise people. And to be honest, even though I know about this phenomena, ah, at times I'm still surprised by it, especially if I'm at the receiving end of that behavior from someone else. So let's just break it down and dive into the psychology of what I'm talking about, which is relational aggression, how it shows up, why it often takes us by surprise. Because when we think of aggression, most of us picture something we can see, right? Something that's obvious, something overt. For example, physical violence, that would be something that we could see, or really harsh words that are used that, you might say during an argument or might be said to you. But there's another side to it that's often described as relational aggression. Maybe you've heard it as passive aggressive behavior. It's going to show up everywhere. Okay. So this is going to be relationships. It can show up in your career. It can show up with colleagues. It just shows up a lot. And this type of aggression isn't about outright confrontation, it's just more subtle. And it often targets social standing, self esteem, reputation. To put it another way, relational aggression is characterized by behaviors that are intended to harm other people, usually through some sort of manipulation or damage to relationships, damage to your career. It just has been a real topic of extensive research. So, lots and lots of social psychologists have researched this topic, not just social psychologists, but many other fields as well. And here's where it gets really interesting. I've told you, if you go look at my videos and stuff, many, many studies, and I've talked about self doubt and different things like that. But there's a lot of studies that have demonstrated that we see this particular behavior most often in women. Okay. That's why I gave you my disclaimer at the beginning of this live. Well, we do see it most often in women. That's true, but that's not to say that we don't see it in men. Okay, so it's important to understand that as well. One other thing I want to tell you, something's actually shifting, and that shift is changing something. So let me tell you about what's going on with that. Now, historically, relational aggression, we know it was considered more prevalent among females, while males were thought to be, acting in more physical aggression. Okay, that much we know. The most recent research challenges this notion. So it's indicating that both male and female are participating in relational aggression through different types of forms and contexts. So they differ a little bit. Now, there was a study that was published in I think it was the American Journal of Criminal Justice. And anyway, so they found that relational aggression occurs among both boys and girls. So they all also were looking at, kids when they were looking at this particular phenomena, with some studies showing that there were really no significant differences. So, what I'm saying is, there are studies coming out now that are showing that perhaps there's less difference, and this is just more prevalent among all of us in general. So while relational aggression remains a concern for men and women, the if you're trying to characterize the distinctions between male and female behaviors are really less pronounced than we thought previously. But why? The next question would be why? Why are we seeing this change after all these years? Because it's just, historically, that's what we thought. Women just practice this more, but now we're seeing a change after all these years. Well, I'm going to tell you why, okay? Because I'm going to share this with you, but you're going to have to stick around for a minute so you can get that answer. Now that we know that men do participate in relational aggression more than we thought, it remains to be seen exactly how that difference looks when we compare that to women. Okay, so let's just focus on just understanding this phenomena first. Let's just do that. Just understand it a little more, understand how it's showing up. So, what we do know that is it's not direct physical aggression, okay? Instead of direct conflict, it might come out as things like, now I told you it could come out as different ways. Now I'm going to go deeper as to what ways it can come out. So it could be sarcasm. That's one way. It could be gossip. That's another way. And it also could be negative comments that could be subtle, but deliberately aim to harm someone. So another reason I wanted to talk about this particular topic is I remember whenever I was teaching and I would really, get to this particular topic in my intro to psychology course that I taught, and the women in my classes were always really surprised. And for some peculiar reason, the men were not surprised. Or was it peculiar? And I'm going to get to into why that is the case as well. Now, at first, when I'd get to that topic and I talk about it, there's a little bit of a pushback, right? From the women, like, wait a minute, you know, we're not really buying into that, because many of us women will subscribe to this idea that there's this shared understanding, if you will, that women should uplift each other. And yet, here's this evidence that I'm talking about from all and tons of study and all these psychologists that are saying, you know what? We're actually doing the opposite of that. And I can tell you, after the first initial pushback that I would get from my students that happened to be female in the class, then there was sort of an unspoken knowing. Okay. And I could see that many of my students that were women either participated or happened to be on the receiving end of being bullied, because essentially that's what it is. It's a form of bullying. And yes, make no mistake about it, this is definitely a form of bullying. And it always led to these really lively discussions with women really sharing stories, all of their stories of feeling betrayed. So they would feel betrayed by their close friends, colleagues, or even strangers, people that they didn't know. It often seems more disappointing as well, because they would share these thoughts about it as well. It felt more disappointing as a woman, because we expect a certain level of connection, a certain level of understanding among each other. And it kind of stings a little bit more because we have those expectations and they're not being met. So in these moments, my students would frequently ask, why do we do this to each other? Why aren't we supporting one another? And I believe this was the exact same question when I ran across that video of the other creator that she had put out because she was just really devastated by the comments that were left behind for her guests. And I hope I can answer a few of those questions today as to why, at least in terms of what the social psychologists have to say. And then I'm going to give you my take, and I'm going to give you a little bit of an example of how that may show up in your life. Because, first of all, psychologists are suggesting that this form of aggression might stem from a variety of societal and evolutionary factors. So, what does that mean? Well, for one, from a very young age, girls are often socialized to avoid any type of open conflict, right? And that can sometimes lead to a buildup of indirect aggression. So you're kind of shoving it down, whatever it is that's bothering you. So instead of actually directly confronting whatever or whoever or whatever's happening, you're just sort of putting it inside. Okay. And it can lead to this buildup of this aggression. So, frustration, all of that. And it might come out and be expressed through these types of social tactics. And some of those social tactics that fall under relational aggression, and you might be surprised about this, but some of those would include exclusion. So, you could exclude someone. And I've already mentioned gossip, or as in the example I gave you of what really led me to this, the creator's video, hurtful comments. And the hurtful comments that people were making were about women who were above, I think, age 40, 50, something along that. Basically, they shouldn't be on the internet online. How dare they show their old self up there? Some comments like that, I'm not even going to repeat the rest of them. But that said, that is the sad irony, because oftentimes these behaviors are used as a way to bond with others. Yes, these negative behaviors, some of those that I just mentioned, are often used as a way to bond with other people. Well, how does that work? Well, think about how gossip, for example, can be a social currency where bonding can happen at the expense of someone else, because here you are gossiping about someone. So you're forming a bond with someone while hurting someone else. Okay. So that's one way in which that can work as well. It's a twisted but real phenomena that reinforces negative dynamics rather than solidarity among women. And here is where I answer the question for you of why we are seeing more men participate in this behavior than we did in the past. And I think probably any of you here probably know the answer. It has to do with our increased social media presence, because the advent of social media has amplified our reach, and so it allows us to participate in this behavior more. Online platforms provide opportunities for a lot of covert aggression, if you will, such as cyberbullying. I don't know if that could be a whole nother topic on its own, which really impacts our children. One, it used to be one of my real past, still is really dislike that, especially for our kids. But it can be more challenging for us to detect and address, because this type of aggression is so subtle sometimes. The digital shift that we have, it just really underscores the importance of understanding relational aggression in both offline and online contexts. Okay. Social media, as we know, is just amplifying this, right? So it's making the problem just grow. I'll just say grow. The Why is that? Well, think about right now, I'm sitting here and I'm talking, and I can see, there's some people watching. I've seen some leave comment, and hello to everyone if you popped in, but I can't really see you, right? But you can see me. So you have anonymity. And so it provides that platform, that distance, when that happens, where it can lead people to say things that they would likely never say if they were face to face, right? So basically, you can hide and say these things and you feel protected, like no one would ever know that was you. So adding to that, societal pressures around appearance. And this happens to both men and women. So this just isn't a woman thing. But we know, especially with women, and I'm just going to use the context of what was happening in the video that brought me here, ageism. So ageism is practiced a lot towards women. Once you reach a certain age, we should put you out to the pasture because you're done, right? So, but it does happen to men as well. So I don't want to exclude my men on this, but appearance. So societal pressures to look a certain way. Success, however you define it, it's depends on your definition, but we know society defines it as one way. Age, I've already mentioned that. Age can be a big issue, but that's interesting too because men are allowed to age certain way in society, but women aren't. But again, that could be a whole nother video. But that's just one way or a few ways in which this happens. Anyway, you get a breeding ground, right? For insecurity that often spills out in the form of criticism directed at others. It becomes really easier to project our own insecurities or our own frustrations onto someone else, especially when we feel removed, right, from the impact of your words. Well, like I said, if you're behind the keyboard and you're sending these things, you're not seen, so you feel removed from that. And so you feel safe. And this really gets to the heart of the matter, I think, because it's easier to judge someone else when we don't have to face them. We don't have to face that human being that's sitting behind the screen. Now, it's worth noting that men and women often express aggression differently, partly because of socialization that I mentioned before, that men on average, it may be more direct through physical means or straightforward confrontation. Now, confrontation doesn't always have to be a physical thing. When I say confrontation, what I mean is being able to express yourself if something's happened that someone was rude to you or something happened. That's what I mean. It doesn't always mean a negative thing, just to be clear. So I guess it would be like speaking up for yourself. Um, I suppose I could use that word for it. And so what happens is when you have women who tend to be more relational or passive in their approach, it doesn't necessarily mean that women are naturally more passive aggressive. Rather, what I'm saying is that the research is saying that societal norms often discourage this sort of open, um, I'll use the word aggression because that's what they use, but it's so subtle that I almost don't want to use that word. But it really leads some to adopt those methods of expressing frustration and hostility. And so rather than that direct confrontation, you might see this indirect action that I talked about: exclusion, backhanded comments, criticism that's aimed at a person's character or their appearance. But let's take a look at what that looks like in action. Because I've talked about it, I've given you some definition, but what does it really look like? So let's give an example of that. A common example of, because sometimes before I give you this example, we may not know we're doing it. Okay. That's important to understand too. Some of us do, some of us may not know we're doing it. So, a common example of unintentional relational aggression on a social media platform, for example, is what we call that indirect exclusion. So, imagine that someone there's lots of these groups. We'll call it a friend group, and they're sharing a group photo or they're tagging everyone in some sort of family memory or something like that, except for what? One person in the group, but they're tagging everybody else. Even if that exclusion wasn't intended to harm, it can feel isolating to the person that was left out. Okay. Now I'm not talking about someone who just forgot. I'm talking about perhaps something else is going on and you're just not vibing with that person in the moment, so you exclude them. There could be a lot of different factors. But anyway, it's going to be noticed, and this actually happens a lot. So this kind of post can subtly damage the relationship that you may have or relationships by making someone feel undervalued or excluded from that group dynamic. Often the person posting may not realize the impact, thinking of it simply as sharing content without considering how it may affect others. And if you are a content creator and you're watching me now, we have a responsibility when we're sharing our content. We have a responsibility to consider how it impacts others. Others are watching us, so we have to be responsible with that, right? It's kind of that same mindset. And so this form of relational aggression, though a lot of times it could be unintentional, can have really long-term effects on group cohesion and perhaps someone's individual self-esteem. So, with that in mind, let's give you a few more examples so that you can truly, really understand how this may happen in your world. And I'm going to give you some subtle examples of relational aggression. And I'm going to use social media because most of us, that's where we spend a lot of our time. But please understand that this can happen in the workplace, it can even happen in your home. So, you want to be mindful of that. Now, here's what I call vague posting or subtweeting, if you will. So you're posting some sort, and I'm sure you've seen this, you're posting a vague or just an ambiguous comment, such as, let's give you an example. You could post something like this: some people really need to get a clue. Okay. You're not tagging anyone, you've just posted that. While that person that's posted that may see this as sort of venting, um, others in their circle may feel targeted or assume that maybe that post is about them. And this can cause some unnecessary tension and misunderstandings. And that is just one subtle way that that can happen. And I've seen it happen. I, I've seen it happen tons and tons of time. And until I really dive deeper into the research, I myself had no idea that that could be a problem for someone. Okay. Another thing that is an example of sort of subtly how you can do this is selective liking and selective commenting. So you would be engaging only with certain people's posts within a friend group, right? And you would consistently ignore posts from others. For instance, someone may always like and comment on two particular friends' updates, but they're going to ignore that third friend's post. This selective engagement can unintentionally send a message to that person that you have some favorites. So you're practicing favoritism, and you're definitely excluding the third friend in the group. So you leave them feeling ignored and undervalued. Okay. And believe it or not, this happens a lot. I used to teach, I created a course. I really got interested in things like this and social media when I was in graduate school, and I created a course called The Psychology of Social Media. And I actually taught that course to first year freshmen coming in. And I can tell you, they do this. They practice this a lot. And so another example would be, and this one is really interesting. And this one, I think a lot of people can probably check the box that maybe they've unintentionally done something like this. But this is using inside jokes to exclude others. So this would be where you're posting comments or memes that reference inside jokes or shared memories without any type of context. especially in a public comment section where others can see but not really understand the reference. And it probably seems harmless to you. And again, we're thinking about this group context, right? Where these inside jokes can make people who weren't involved feel kind of left out. And it can lead to subtle feelings of relational aggression, which can manifest differently based on whatever social dynamic is going on. And it's often associated a lot of unfortunately, we do see this a lot with more women than men, although we're seeing that gap certainly change. Now, here's how these behaviors might look, because I've spoken about the difference between men and women and some of the gaps that are happening. So you might be wondering, well, what actually are those differences in behavior? And I want to talk about them a little bit. And again, I think that last example that I just gave you could certainly move right on over into the work context, because I don't know if you've ever worked with colleagues or before, if you had your bestie at work or whatever, they have their inside language and their inside stuff going on. And sometimes it depends on where you're at and when that's appropriate. And I think sometimes people just do it and they don't realize that they're actually excluding others who may actually be in that group. So, but let's move right on in. And if you have any questions or comments, you can leave them in the comments, certainly. And I will do my best to answer them and certainly engage with it. Um, but in the meantime, let's give you a bit of example of how this might look when we look at those behaviors between men and women. So let's look at indirect exclusion through the group photos. We talked about that. So let's just put it in the context of what that would look like in a woman. So, according to research, again, I'm going to give you my take at the end here. So, according to research, a woman might post a group photo with several friends, intentionally leaving out one or two people from that friend group. She's going to do this as some sort of subtle way to say, hey, I favor these people over you. Or maybe she's expressing some conflict that they're having. So it can come across as, a passive way to signal some sort of social hierarchy as well, with the in group versus the out group of the friend circle. So that's what it may look like in a female. In a male, this could be what it looks like. A man might share a group photo with friends and make a joke in the caption like, best people ever, or something like that, or, squad goals or whatever. I don't know, something along the lines. But he'll leave out certain friends in that best people ever, right? And, while the exclusion may not appear intentional, it can still convey a sense of competition, if you will. So they're putting more of this competition, factor in how it would come up and show up in a male versus female. But if you were to do the same thing and you were to look at this, remember I talked about selective liking or praising someone publicly. Well, in a woman, it might look like this. She's frequently liking and publicly praising a particular friend's achievements, but she's ignoring the other friend, right? Even though the other friend may have tons of achievements. And this selective engagement can really subtly communicate, you know, a judgment, right? And also who she values more because she's given them more attention. So she's reinforcing social ranking. So it really goes back to that kind of hierarchy thing. And then how would that look like in a male? Well, the male might engage in selective liking as well, but it could show up through more competitive. So we're getting to that competition thing as well. Actions like praising or joking with certain friends who share interests in sports or work achievements or specific hobbies. Then he's just going to ignore the rest, right? So again, I see that as kind of similar because it's creating that in group, if you will, if you remove that competition factor, right? So you got this in group bonding and it can make others feel excluded. less connected, less valued within their social circle. And then the last example I gave you, and I'll go ahead and give you this, because I think it's also important, the humor part and sarcasm part in public comments. So in women might use humor or lighthearted teasing in a public comment. So they might hit at a friend's insecurities. So they might joke about something they know personal with their friend, and it could hit on their insecurities. It could They could joke about their appearance. That's a real biggie, or a personal quirk. While it can be framed as fun or playful, it often holds. It really just these sort of subtle jabs at a friend, and it can target the areas that they know that their friend feels uncomfortable with, vulnerable with, right? I think we all, it could be physical. Maybe a friend doesn't like a specific thing about, I don't know, her hair, or, her skin. I don't know. I'm just saying that it could show up that way. And for a man, it could be, well, the man's going to use humor or sarcasm in the comment areas to assert dominance, to establish a hierarchy, like tagging a friend with "try to keep up, bro," or something like that. Now, I just want to be clear. Sometimes these things are happening between friends, and it's cool. That's the way that their relationship works. This is showing up differently. Okay. I just want to be clear with that. That's why it's subtle. That's why it's kind of hard to really see it. That's why this topic really needs to be talked about. Um, so anyway, so that's how it might come up in a male, because it's that competition type thing. Now, these subtle differences really, I think, show us how relational aggression can operate under, both male and female norms, if you will. Now, this again is all within that research paradigm and what they consider norms. So they would say women, using these relational tactics to assert social bonds and hierarchy, while men are using competition or hierarchy reinforcement to establish this sort of social dominance, if you will. These behaviors, I'm going to tell you that once we got through the examples, these behaviors are often seen as harmless. Many of them are seen as harmless, yet they can unintentionally really hurt relationships. Some are overt. Some of the comments that women put out there or men put out there, they're really obvious. And some are not, right? But we know that they can hurt our relationships. They can leave people feeling not good. Let's just sum it up. So that said, but where does that leave us, right? Here's the thing. I told you that some of this behavior could be due to differences in socialization, what society expects based on, these gender norms, if you will. But there is something deeper here, something that I believe is at the heart of the problem. One of the first steps would be to recognize these behaviors. And in order to recognize these behaviors, you need to understand that relational aggression often stems from insecurities and unresolved emotional pain. And it's manifesting in these subtle behaviors that are really undermining others while reinforcing a really fragile self image. Okay. Well, when individuals use tactics like selective exclusion, for example, those vague posting or teasing or whatever, it's often really a reflection of their own self doubt projected onto others. This behavior, it's almost a protective behavior for the individual. It feels protective to the person doing it or empowering in the moment, but it's creating a cycle of distrust, and it deepens the divide between your genuine self or the person doing it, their genuine self, and the person they're projecting it onto. Okay. Instead of forming real connections, the actions that they're doing is reinforcing negative self perceptions on themselves. So ultimately they're hurting themselves more than they're hurting the other person. This is what I'm kind of getting to. Yes, it is hurting the other person, but they're reinforcing those negative self perceptions about themselves and certainly on the other person as well. And they're trapping both all of people involved in a space where true confidence and connection just can't happen. And oftentimes you'll find these individuals being some of the loneliest individuals, often wondering why they can't make connections. Okay. They need to heal. And healing requires us to examine these behaviors honestly and recognize them as symptoms of a really larger issue here. And the only way to do that is by only by confronting the root of our insecurities through self reflection, through setting boundaries, and actively working on our own self worth. That's when we can break free from the need to rely on relational aggression as a form of validation. Healing involves addressing our self doubt, okay? Understanding our triggers and building healthier communication habits. And I think I don't know if it was a video or a live I did discussing how to basically chip down self doubt and achieve success faster. I can't remember, but it's somewhere. If you haven't watched it, go watch that because that'll help as well. But this process not only helps us form stronger, more authentic relationships, but it also fosters a sense of inner peace and self-acceptance that really what will happen is that it will render relational aggression unnecessary. So you won't feel the need to do it. So cuz when you're healing from within, you're empowering yourself to connect without judgment or some sort of hidden agenda. And you're going to be able to create a foundation for genuine, lasting relationships. I'm telling you that awareness of this can help us stop the cycle. And instead of falling into that trap, let's challenge ourselves to support each other, genuinely support each other, because we know the difference between genuine support and not so much genuine, right? We need to call out hurtful behavior in a very constructive way. I think a lot of the times when these things come up, and not all the time, but a lot of the time when these things come up, if we actually say to the person, you know what, that hurt me, or I don't know why you would say it, however you want to approach it, but you need to call out that behavior in a constructive way. You might be surprised at the response you get because you might actually have a really constructive healing conversation with that person, and you might not. Some people aren't ready, and if they simply aren't ready, then there's also the need for you to remove yourself from that energy as well, because you need to protect, you have boundaries, right? And we also want to remember that a little empathy goes a long way. A little goes a long way. So imagine if instead of, people were out there tearing each other down, we were actually, and I'll speak to just women right now because that's, historically, this is where it goes. Even though I gave you all a little secret, we're now seeing that more in men because of social media. But historically, we know that this shows up in women. So as a woman, I'll speak to women right now and say, you know what? Imagine instead if we were out, we didn't want to tear each other down and we just saw every woman as a potential ally, someone who might be facing similar challenges, similar insecurities. And it's about embracing the power of connection with others over comparison with others. And I have some bonus information for you. Um, in the form of kind of like a question and answer thing. But before I get to that, again, I want to say thank you to the people that came in. Thank you for sitting here, listening, taking in this information with me. If you have any similar experience that you want to put it in the chat and share with us, or a question about it, certainly do that. This is might seem like an kind of a left topic, so to speak, on my channel because I often talk about positivity, and different self-doubt, confidence, energy. But this is absolutely a perfect topic because it's also dealing with healing. And healing is so important. If you don't do the work, then you can't reach that space. Okay. So that said, let's get to some bonus questions, not questions, but some bonus information for you. A lot of the times in my career, that well, I'm no longer a professor. This is what I'm doing. This is how I'm trying to help. So a lot of similar questions would come up, and you may have those questions. So I'm going to go over them fairly. I won't keep you to, I know it's different times things. So I'll try to be as brief as possible, but I explained to you what exactly is relational aggression, right? It's just that indirect aggression. And that's what you need to know that harms others. So it's a form of bullying, it's a form of aggression, but it's more indirect. And that's like gossip and all that. And it takes form in different spaces across different contexts. Okay. Um, I said that relational aggression isn't always intentional because that is a popular question. Is relational aggression intentional? No, not always. Many people will engage in it without realizing it because sometimes it comes from those insecurities that I mentioned or a lack of healthy communication skills, even. Maybe someone doesn't know how to communicate. Maybe that's the space that, they're used to is a really hostile space and that's how they communicate. So maybe they need to learn, right? Oh, wow. I'm gonna read this. This topic resonated more to my 12-year-old and 11-year-old girls who had to seek medical help to help them get through the last months. Yes. Oh, yes. So, I mentioned cyberbullying amongst our children and our girls. Absolutely. It is so you mentioning that, and it's so prevalent among that age group. And I think that if we could get in and we could really speak to that age group and we could talk to them about better ways to communicate, because I think in that age group, such a weird stage where, our young girls and our young boys, they're definitely there's a lot of bullying going on and a lot of this stuff going on, and it causes a lot of mental health issues. Yeah, I would agree. Absolutely. Especially with you having direct experience with your daughters. This is absolutely a hot topic. Yeah. Yep, it's something that people deal with all the time. And it's unfortunate and it's so that we couldn't just get to the root of the problem and realize, and look more at our how we're alike than we're different in that way. But absolutely, we definitely need to collab on that. Definitely, that is a space where really upsetting to me with our young women. Another passion of mine, thinking about our young girls and society and how fast society is going in so many different ways, and these things are happening to them. Just absolutely things they do not need to be dealing with. It's just, with all the other things that are going on. So absolutely, thank you for that. Um, so the next question, I feel that as adults like us, though this happens to us, our age and wisdom can take this, but young girls is really more important to get a lot. Yep, you are correct. It's funny because I remember as when I was younger, anything like that, man, it would devastate me. Now I just kind of see it for what it is, and do my best, but not always. Sometimes, we still deal with things that can kind of maybe give us pause, but we're able to move forward in a much healthier way. But you're absolutely correct. Definitely would want to collab on that for our young girls for and you know what? A lot of that research that they get happens to be, even though they do it across the demographic, they look at young, sort of middle and older, even though we know that it's happening across all these age groups, we definitely know we get a lot of data from that particular age group. So they're talking about these young girls and boys, and that would be the prime age group that they get a lot of that data from, that is just so prevalent happening. And I really think, to be honest with you, I think social media, a lot of our kids now, they're born with cell phones. I mean, a lot of the schools, I don't know how the schools are there, but a lot of the schools here, they've taken out certain things like, they do everything on an iPad. They do everything through some sort of media. And I think that that actually changes, having a background in neuro scientist. So I'm a both background in psychology and behavioral neuroscientist as well. And so the neuro part of me can see the brain structures changing so much, from interacting with this type of media, especially in our young girls and boys, because I don't know if you know this, but the brain is not fully developed until you're like 25, 26. So all of those connections that are happening within the brain, they're happening during that time. And they're either building or losing those connections. And I think it's changing some of those structures in the reward system, but which would be directly related to some of this. But that's another conversation. But I definitely know that we do, taking it back, get a lot of our data from that. So social media, that's a question that I actually get is, can social media make, relational aggression worse? Well, absolutely. I believe, it provides just this, like I spoke, this platform for passive aggressive behaviors. Now, I don't know if this is happening necessarily. I can't, if it was in school or if it was something that was happening, online or just through both. And I don't know what your rules are for that either, but yeah, but it absolutely can happen. I mean, I think social media just pushes that, more button on it. So it can make it worse. And I think this would be a great question for girls that age is, how do you know if you're being targeted or if you're engaging in it, right? So you need to look out for those patterns that are happening in those groups. And friends groups are really popular because as human beings, we really, really, really have a desire to be connected and this feeling of belongingness. So there's a lot of those friends groups that happen, and within those groups is when is how a lot of this stuff happens. And so you would need to, look for patterns of being, if someone's always excluding another person and, not allowing them to be part of these social interactions, or they're being vague or providing really critical comments all the time, gossiping, etc. Basically trying to break up bonds. That's definitely one way, that you could tell. And the next thing would be, well, how do you avoid engaging in relational aggression, um, if you struggle with self doubt? And I think this does apply to our young girls, but I think it also really goes on up into all ages. How can you avoid engaging in relational aggression if you struggle with self-doubt? Because that's really where a lot of it comes from. So you would just need to build focus on your self-worth independently of others' opinions. So I think this is where actual age comes in as some really positive things, because as we grow and we experience, we learn that, what other people think about us is their business. right? So we need to practice self awareness. We need to practice that by reflecting on our thoughts before our actions and really finding healthier ways to cope with feelings of insecurity or jealousy. And for older and even younger girls, I think journaling could be a good thing, but that would be a total different way in which to approach that with our young girls, certainly. Um, again, um, it used to be the question, and you may still get it about, well, do women practice it more than men? Well, we see that gap starting to close, and that's due to social media, of course. And when you talk about what that link is between self doubt and relational aggression, you really need to know that it really is a way for the person that's feeling that self doubt to have some sort of sense of control. Okay. Or maybe they want to feel superior because when they put other people down indirectly, they're just boosting their own self esteem temporarily. But it's having the opposite effect in the long run, as I mentioned. And it definitely can lead to long term consequences, as we know, because if you're continuing to do that, it's going to be almost impossible for you to create and maintain relationships. Friendships will be damaged. Um, Examples could be, of how this might look long term. It's really interesting because long term, a lot of people, and it's sad because humans really want to have a need to belong and connect, and a lot of people end up not so much connecting with others and having issues being able to be successful across all domains. For example, we're new here, and I'm a new creator here. I'm absolutely excited to collaborate with you. um but if I was practicing this and doing all this other stuff, that wouldn't be a possibility for me. So success wouldn't be a possibility. Getting my message out to be able to help others would not be possible for me, right? Because my message wouldn't be positive. It would be kind of negative. So there's that as well. So, and that can happen in professional settings. And I don't know if you run across this as much in professional settings, but I definitely did. You'd be surprised in academia is a place of competitiveness because I was in a tenured track position and everybody wants to be tenured and you got to publish and then I'm running a lab and I'm teaching and you're constantly being evaluated. And so it's a very competitive space, especially for me. I chose, in behavioral neuroscience or neuroscience in general, it's generally dominated by males. And so I chose a career that was, very difficult for me anyway, but I like challenges. So yes, I saw a lot of that. And we know that it's impacting mental health. And you mentioned that, it leads to feelings of isolation, self doubt, anxiety, low self esteem, not just for the person that is the target, but also the person that's doing it, because it's disrupting all these social systems, social support system. They're essential for mental well being. So there's a lot of healthy ways that, we could deal with that. Um, I would say this is more for, I think the way you approach it would be different. So I think it could be for both girls and women, but self reflection. But we want to be careful with that depending on age and journaling and practicing positive self talk, which is why I have these affirmations. I'm telling you, affirmations are amazing. You really, really, really should use those on a daily basis and make sure that you're keeping yourself busy. You have supportive friendships, a supportive family. You're working with a therapist, maybe if that's what you need. There are certainly great ways to handle insecurities constructively. Um, and if you're supporting someone who is always being targeted, which happen by someone of being targeted by relational aggression, you will listen to their experiences, right? Without judging, you're validating their experiences, you're encouraging them to set those boundaries. You're encouraging them to focus on their own self well-being. You're helping them provide, you're providing a really supportive community, which makes a huge difference. I don't know if you know this, but there's tons of um, research where people live for really long time, much longer when they have a supportive community. So I think one of the questions I get to is, oh, yeah, that's a great question. So work bullying happened to me, and I have a huge experience share on this topic. That, yeah, and we can talk about that because there's so many different spaces that you can actually that this happens. Work bullying is definitely one of them. I had the experience where before I left my career, which was a tough decision to do. Um, I was specifically targeted, and it was by more than one person. And basically, it's for all the reasons that I mentioned. But when you're in the thick of it and you're being targeted, it's very difficult to get up and go to work. And I think it really was part of the reason. No, I know it was part of the reason when I left my career. I spent 2.5 years being really depressed, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I'm not of retirement age yet. And I spent a lot of time and energy, getting, going through school, getting my degrees, establishing my career, and I just gave everything up. And part of it was because of that. It was a constant bullying at work, constant, putting up roadblocks for me to achieve success and be successful. And I really believe that aside from what I said, a lot of the times there's this thing called, jealousy, because people, well, it's inadequacy. And I mentioned that in others. And I think that's, and we can talk about that as well. I can go deeper into that when we do this, because wow, that really, I had a lot of trauma from that. A lot of trauma. It was very difficult for me to even when I started this channel as kind of a way to get myself comfortable getting back. I used to speak in front of huge, conferences and audiences and stuff. And I lost all of my confidence because of that. And it was very difficult for me. So that's part of the reason I started this. And plus I still wanted to share. I have these things to share and to help others. And of course, I want to be successful in that. So it was a weird space. I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. A lot of my early videos, I was just doing some random stuff. And it was very interesting until it really evolved, and it continues to evolve. I'm still building my brand to where I'm like, it's okay. I can share, these things that I'm an expert in, and I can share the ways in which I healed myself, and I can share that I wrote a journal about it, and yada yada. So, but anyway, but we can definitely get into that. But boy, those early those early videos was a little cringe worthy, but it's just about getting yourself out there sometimes. So, um, and I really want to say this as well. I don't know why I'm reminded of this while I'm talking about it, but let's say that this is well, I know why I'm reminded, because I'm talking about what happened to me in my workplace. Um, and I didn't know how to bring it up. I didn't know how to say, here I was in all rights according to that, criterion. I was successful, right? And yet I didn't know how to bring this up to someone. I felt afraid. I had a lot of fear. I wasn't sure about what kind of backlash I would get, because I, wasn't part of the in group, so to speak. So, how do we bring up this topic to people who are doing it to us, or maybe friends who are unintentionally engaging and you see this happening? So one of the ways we can do is making sure that, first of all, that we actually are able to do it, that we, sometimes we just have to be uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. There's just no way around it, right? But we want to approach that conversation and, not aggressively, but we definitely want to approach it. We want to express what we see without accusing anyone, right? This is how I feel, yada, yada. And you might say something like this. If you're talking to a friend, perhaps that you knew, you observed them and you see that maybe they're practicing this behavior, you could say, I noticed that some of our interactions seem to leave other people out. So this could be if you're part of like a friend group. Do you think we could be, we could actually invite other people or we could be more inclusive? So you could do something like that. If it's happening to you, I think you should just be, as direct as you can be and let the person know this is unacceptable. And I think this goes back to setting boundaries, right? Setting boundaries. And that is very difficult. Actually, I'm going to circle back to the work bullying because that can be very difficult in a workspace. It can create, by setting boundaries, it can unfortunately create a toxic environment because once you do speak up, then it could be problematic. And I finally did, and it was very problematic for me. Okay. And I didn't even do it, I didn't even get everybody because there was more than one person. But when I internalized it, that's another thing. See, this can go so many different ways. I internalized it for so long. I felt like I had done something wrong. It was my fault. What could I have done different? And that's something I think that people who are practicing this unintentionally, because people who are doing it intentionally, they're not, unfortunately, they haven't probably reached a space where they're ready to heal. But I'm talking, you really need to understand the damaging effects it has on the person that's receiving it. There are a lot of damaging effects that can happen. A lot of times people will internalize that. They definitely will. They'll take it on their shoulders like it's something that they did. How could they be different? So that's unfortunate. But yeah, I mean, like, wow, it has so many implications on it. I think that, we really need to ask ourselves, how can we make our interactions with each other more positive, more uplifting? So I did a video on this idea of because a lot of times, believe it or not, people have come onto my channel and given some thumbs down for certain topics because they get into this idea of they're thinking that when you say the word positive, that, oh, just everything is, it can't be positive, and that's this idea of toxic positivity. Well, let me talk about that a little bit because anytime you put the word, um, yes. Yeah, we'll definitely have to Zoom live on that. I definitely wouldn't see you as old age. Yeah, I you definitely look amazing. We'd have to talk about self-care too on that. But yeah, definitely experience because it definitely it happens to everybody. And it's such a, it's it's just people really need to deal with those insecurities. And also, we need to be able to stop internalizing as well. I had some healing to do. I definitely had healing to do that I didn't know I needed to do. I felt like here I was, boom, I'm doing what I need to do. I'm successful, you know, I'm this, I'm that, I'm getting things done, and I'm also teaching and I'm giving back, and the whole thing. Little did I know that once that started coming at me like that, it would pretty much, it was devastating. I can tell you that. So I had a lot of healing to do. Now after, and healing is always continuous, right? But now it's a different story. Now I know how to approach it. Now I know how to see it. I can see it. I didn't see it before because it was so subtle, and things. And so again, when we think about it, how can we make our interactions with each other more positive, just more uplifting? I would hope that when someone leaves my presence, they feel, better. They feel like they have more hope. They feel a little bit uplifted because I brought that type of energy to them and to myself. So if you've ever experienced, and we can see that, some of us have, but if you've ever experienced or participated in this type of behavior, I want you to know something. I want you to know that change is possible. It is absolutely possible because we can do that. We can build each other up. We can do that. We don't you have to sit and judge. It's not for us to sit in judgment of others. It's not for us to do things like this to others. And I really, really, really want you, whether you're watching this now or you're going to come back and watch it, I would really, really love for us to have a really engaging conversation in the comments about this. Um, and we're going to bring it back because we're actually I'm going to get together with another creator and we're going to bring this back, and we're actually going to dive even deeper because, believe it or not, you can. There's so much to this. But I want to know in the comments below, I want you to share your own experiences, and I want you to talk about it so we can have a conversation in the community about it. And this is not, just our women in the community, this is our men as well, because men have been targets. Men have been targets. We can't leave them out. They have been targets of this. Women, of course, have been targets, and practice it. So, whether you participate in this type of behavior, maybe you need to step back and take a look at your own type of behavior. Maybe you didn't realize and you were unintentionally doing things. And so it will be easy for you because once you have awareness, you can stop and maybe change your behavior. So I want to have this open conversation about how we can foster a more supportive environment for each other. This is a huge thing within my own channel. It is my intention that we build a community here. I want to build a community where we can have these types of conversations, real conversations about these types of things that happen, but not just the conversations, but how can we heal? How do we heal from it? How do we move forward from it? And all of these things really are integrated with one another. They really are. They really are. So self doubt, confidence, insecurities, all of these things are integrated, and it doesn't matter, how old you are, how young you are, um, whether you're male, female, however you, whatever, it doesn't matter because we all have some of the same experiences and we can all talk about them, and they're going to be different. I mean, we could think back when we were younger, what type of experience we had with that, where bullying, this is a type of bullying is bullying, and how do we deal with that in terms of our own insecurities? And I think definitely learning, I think a phrase, I don't know when or how I learned this phrase, and I certainly can't claim it, but I think it works when you say, how someone feels about me is none of my business. That's how you say it. So so you get to that point to where you're like, well, what how they feel about me, what they think of me is none of my business. In other words, their opinion isn't going to change anything I'm doing or change me, right? So that's kind of what that means. So, and I thought that was the greatest thing, instead of, getting angry, because it's part of the problem. Everybody is quick to get angry and just start lashing out. I think there's a better way kind of to approach things. And it's not that that human emotion isn't going to happen. You just want to give yourself, some grace when it does. But it definitely, there are different ways to practice it. But so again, I just want to say that, if you've ever participated in this type of behavior, know that change is possible. Okay. Know that we can build each other up, know that we can heal. You got to do your healing. You can't just push it to the side. You got to do your healing. I don't know where that may come from. I have several videos talking. I actually wrote a shadow book journal that will help guide you through healing. And I did a live on that, talking about that as well, how my approach is different because we live in a world where we've always, if your basic needs aren't being met, it's kind of difficult to do that. So I talked to you about that. So you definitely want to do that. And it's almost the holidays anyway. Why not buy yourself a gift? But I'm going to actually have more videos or lives on this, maybe having some guests on as well, because I think it's important to really continue to talk about this and dive deeper because together, I think we can create a more compassionate world. Need to start somewhere. Why not here? That's that's what I always say. Um, so yes, I think that is probably a lot for y'all to take in all at one time. Um, and I really appreciate, and I won't keep y'all here any longer. If you have any questions, you don't have to. You can ask questions of me. If you have any questions that don't deal with this topic, I'll certainly be happy to answer them as well. Um, this is a time I try to. I'm going to be doing. I will say this. I'm going to try to do lives at different times like this and maybe earlier and later because I know I have people that I'm in the United States and some people aren't. So I've got lots of viewers that are just kind of global everywhere. So I'm going to try to catch as many people as I can because I think these are the types of conversations that work really well when you have people interacting and asking questions because they can be very sensitive. They can be confusing to digest. And also, people may just want to talk about their experiences. So I'm going to try to do that more, which is why I tried to make this alive, instead of the video I was going to post, which I just didn't feel it did it justice. So, um, are there any questions that you have of me? I will I will say this. I don't know if you have my email and I'm not quite sure but you can if you need to contact me and I particularly want you to contact me. My email is on my about page, I believe. Yeah, that's where you can find my email. So just reach out to me there and we can definitely set up a time or if you have any questions or anything like that. So, and I'm also going to be putting out, aside from collaborating, we're moving into a new month and I do a section on my channel where okay, I do. I'm going to put my email in the comments below so that you can have it. That may be why other people are having. So there's my email. So you have it. Let me move this mic back over here. So we're moving into, and I'm going to put out a call out for this as well. And I've got one channel that at some point, perfect, that we'll be doing as well. But I want to line up. So you may have noticed I do a little, it's called a spotlight section on my channel where I interview, it's more like a conversation with other creators so that my viewers and your viewers, we talk about your channel. I've done one already, which was Frank Eats. And if you haven't had a chance, go check out his channel. Man, I love the food channels, and he's got a great channel. I think he has a TikTok now. You'll make friends, you'll be able to network, which is really important. And so if any of you are on here and you're interested in that as well, definitely email me. We just spotlight your channel. I know that it helps to network as new creators and it gets your channel out there. And also, we get to meet new people. And it's more like a conversation than an interview, but it's directly all about your channel. So it's a section on my channel that I do as part of a community because to build a community, you got to reach out to others. So if you're interested in that, definitely sorry about that. Definitely, send me an email. I'm going to put out a call. I've got one channel I know for sure that wants to do that. So yeah, and we can set you up, and we can. My viewers will have access to you. Your viewers will have access to the interview, and it's just a win-win situation. And I'll get to know more about what inspired you, and with your channel. So that said, if you don't have any questions of me, again, thank you all so much for showing up. Thank you for engaging. Thank you for being part of this community. And until we meet next time, take care of yourself. Take care of your mind, your body, and your soul. I've enjoyed this. Have a great weekend.